Welcome back to our channel. Dani had always believed that pain arrived suddenly, like a blade cutting through skin. But the truth was slower, crueler. It seeped in quietly, through late nights when Andre's phone lit up in another room, through his growing silences, through the way he touched her like she was something already lost. At first, she convinced herself it was fatigue, pressure, a phase. Love, she told herself, was endurance. But love, she would soon learn, could also be a slow execution. The night she found out was unremarkable. A forgotten jacket draped over a chair, the faint trace of perfume that wasn't hers, a message left open on his laptop like a confession begging to be discovered. There was no dramatic discovery, no confrontation, only the quiet collapse of something sacred. Dani stood frozen, her heart not breaking but hardening. She realized then that betrayal didn't scream, it whispered. For days she carried the secret in silence, as though speaking it aloud would make it real. Every movement of Andre's became unbearable, the calmness in his voice, the way he avoided her eyes, the deliberate gentleness that had replaced passion. He was already gone, just waiting for the moment to make it official. The bed they once shared felt like a tomb, and Dani slept on the edge as if distance could protect her from the truth lying inches away. When Andre finally told her he wanted to leave, it was almost merciful. His words came not from cruelty, but conviction. And that was what hurt most. He didn't deny it. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He had simply decided that he deserved something else, something honest. Ashley had become his justification, the embodiment of everything he believed his life had been missing. Dani understood then that she had not been replaced by passion, but by a narrative, the story Andre wanted to tell himself about freedom and authenticity. The days after he left were a blur of motion without meaning. Dani moved through their house like a ghost occupying someone else's life. Every photograph became an autopsy. Every sound reminded her of what was gone, the coffee maker sputtering to life, the echo of footsteps that no longer returned. Grief turned her body into a battlefield between rage and emptiness. Some mornings she would destroy everything in sight, shattering glasses, ripping photographs, clawing at the walls, and other mornings she would simply sit on the floor for hours, unable to move, staring into nothing. Her anger became her only companion. It pulsed inside her like a fever she couldn't break. She hated Andre, she hated Ashley, but beneath it all, she hated herself, for not seeing it coming, for loving a man who could erase her so easily. That self-hatred grew into obsession. She followed their lives from afar, Ashley's social media posts, Andre's new home, the staged happiness they displayed like trophies. Each image drove her deeper into the darkness of what she had become. A witness to her own erasure. Ashley, too, was unraveling beneath the surface. What began as excitement, the thrill of forbidden love, the illusion of being chosen, began to rot the longer she lived inside it. Andre's love was consuming, demanding, as if he needed her to validate his escape from guilt. She had thought she was saving him, giving him something pure, but soon she realized she had inherited a man hollowed out by remorse. His affection came in waves, violent, desperate, and unpredictable. At times he looked at her with the same eyes he once gave Dani, and she began to understand that she was not the ending of his story, only its repetition. Andre, meanwhile, began to feel the weight of what he had destroyed. At first, freedom felt intoxicating, the clean air of a life rebuilt without lies. But it didn't last. He couldn't escape Dani's presence. Her silence haunted him more than her tears ever could. He saw her in the small things, the way light filtered through morning curtains, the quiet spaces between conversations. Guilt crept into his veins, not as regret, but as an infection that distorted everything. He began to resent Ashley for reminding him of the woman he had abandoned, and in turn, resent Dani for existing in a part of him that refused to die. The three of them became trapped in a silent orbit of pain, bound not by love, but by consequence. Dani tried to rebuild her life, but every attempt collapsed under the weight of memory. She tried therapy, travel, reinvention, but nothing could cleanse the lingering taste of betrayal. Sometimes she imagined confronting them, not to hurt them, but to look them in the eyes and see if they were still capable of guilt. Other times, she fantasized about disappearing entirely, leaving behind the ruins of her name so that no one would remember who she used to be. One evening, unable to bear the emptiness, Dani returned to the house she once shared with Andre. It stood half-abandoned, echoing with the ghosts of their former life. She wandered through the rooms, touching the walls, tracing the outlines of their past. The smell of dust and decay filled her lungs. She found one of Andre's old shirts still hanging in the closet, untouched, forgotten, and for a moment, she pressed it to her face, as if she could inhale the last breath of what they had been. Then she burned it. The flames rose quietly, devouring fabric and memory alike, the firelight flickering across her face like a silent confession. Meanwhile, Andre sat awake in his new home beside Ashley, unable to sleep. His mind replayed Dani's expression from the day he left, not anger, not pleading, but something far worse, stillness. He realized then that he hadn't broken her heart, he had hollowed her soul. The guilt became unbearable. He began drinking, staying out late, chasing distractions that never lasted. Ashley watched him decay, her own joy curdling into resentment. She had won him, but she had inherited his ruin. As weeks turned to months, the cracks between them deepened. The affair that once felt intoxicating became a prison. Ashley began to fear Dani's silence, convinced it was the calm before some unspoken retribution. She imagined seeing Dani's shadow outside their window, hearing her footsteps in the night. The paranoia consumed her. She began locking the doors twice, sleeping with the lights on. Andre told her she was imagining things, but in truth, he felt it too. The ghost of what they had done was everywhere, pressing against the edges of their new life. Dani, however, was no longer watching them. She had reached a different kind of madness, the quiet kind that doesn't scream, doesn't seek revenge, but simply withdraws from everything human. She sold her belongings, moved into a small apartment overlooking the sea, and disappeared from the world. No one heard from her again. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howled through the old Dupree district where she once lived, neighbors swore they saw a woman standing at the shore, motionless, unblinking, staring into the horizon as if waiting for something that would never return. Andre never saw her again, yet her absence haunted him more than her presence ever did. He began dreaming of her, not as the woman he betrayed, but as the reflection of everything he had destroyed in himself. Each morning he woke with her name in his throat, a word that no longer belonged to anyone. Ashley tried to hold him, to rebuild what they'd broken, but love built on ruins always collapses. Eventually, she left too, quietly, without explanation. When Andre returned home that night to find her gone, the silence felt familiar. He sat alone in the dark, the same way Dani once had, surrounded by the echoes of his choices. And in that silence, he finally understood the truth Dani had carried long before he did, that love, once poisoned by deceit, never truly dies, it just lingers, rotting in the corners of the heart, waiting to be remembered. The rain returned on the day Andre found the letter. It was short, written in Dani's careful, detached handwriting, a few lines that said everything and nothing at once. There was no anger, no plea for redemption, only a quiet acknowledgement that some wounds were never meant to heal. She wished him peace, not forgiveness. Forgiveness was too human, too merciful. What they had become existed beyond mercy. Andre read it again and again until the words blurred into shapes, until meaning dissolved into silence. The house felt smaller than ever, suffocating under the weight of memory. He looked around, the walls, the photographs, the hollow spaces that once held laughter, and realized he had been living inside a graveyard disguised as a home. Somewhere across the city, Dani stood by the sea, her hair whipped by the wind, the salt air stinging her eyes. The horizon stretched endlessly, cold and gray, but in that emptiness, she found something close to peace. She no longer felt rage, only release, a calm born not of healing but of surrender. Love had ended, but so had fear. The ocean, vast and indifferent, seemed to understand what no person ever could, that some stories end not with closure, but with silence. Ashley watched the rain from her window, tracing its path down the glass. She had what she thought she wanted, yet she felt nothing but dread. The silence André left behind was unbearable. His absence was louder than his love had ever been. She realized she had inherited not a man, but his ruin, and no amount of affection could cleanse the guilt that bound them. As night fell, the city lights shimmered like distant stars over water. Dani walked into the tide until the cold touched her bones, and for the first time in months, she breathed without pain. Behind her, the world continued, indifferent, eternal, swallowing every whisper of what once was. Somewhere far away, André closed his eyes and whispered her name to the dark. The sound vanished before it reached the air, carried off by a wind that remembered everything and forgave nothing.